All right, so today we're going deep on something pretty interesting. We're diving into Davos, that big World Economic Forum thing in Switzerland.
Oh yeah, Davos is like the who's who of global movers and shakers all in one place.
Huh.
Heads of state, CEOs, economists, thought leaders, all those folks.
Exactly. It's a huge stage, and what really caught our eye was this was the very first major international appearance of the newly inaugurated U.S. president,
Yeah.
second term and all that.
Yeah, stepping onto the world stage right out of the gate with a fresh mandate. I mean, that's got to be a pretty calculated move. And what are you going to signal to the world? What's the tone going to be?
And that's really the heart of what we're digging into today, right? What exactly went down during this speech? What were the immediate reactions, the vibe, the potential direction, all of that.
Right, because that first impression on the global scene
Hmm.
can really set the stage for the whole term.
Absolutely. So, for this deep dive, we're looking at a YouTube transcript from the Ring of Fire. They did a whole breakdown of the president's Davos speech and the responses that came right after.
Okay, the Ring of Fire. Interesting. They tend to lean a certain way politically, don't they?
They do. But remember, we're here to analyze the source material, not endorse any particular viewpoint.
Right, of course, just setting the stage for our listeners.
Exactly. So let's get into it. The Ring of Fire, their main takeaway was pretty bold. They claim that the president embarrassed both himself and the entire country at Davos.
Wow, okay, strong words right off the bat. How do they back that up?
Well, they say it was this combination of ranting and raving, and this is key, spreading what they call outright lies during the speech.
So they're hitting both the style and the substance, the way it was delivered and the actual content of what was said.
Right, and they give specific examples. Let's start with trade relations with the EU.
Okay, yeah, that's always a hot topic.
Okay. The president reportedly said that the EU treats the U.S. very unfairly, very badly. He brought up hundreds of billions of dollars of deficits and hinted at using tariffs to, even things out.
Now, trade deficits are a tricky thing, right? There are different schools of thought on how to interpret them. Some see them as purely negative, a sign of being taken advantage of, while others see them as reflecting a strong economy with high consumer demand. So just to be clear, that's not me saying the president's right or wrong, just adding some context.
Absolutely. Context is key. And the transcript then jumps into a bunch of reactions from different folks, and they don't hold back.
Oh boy, lay it on me.
So there's Olga Lotman. She's known for her work on Russia and Ukraine, and she just straight up lists a bunch of claims from the speech that she says are flat out false.
Like what specifically?
It's a whole laundry list, she mentions. The president saying things like, the world saw the light with his win, millions of Russians and Ukrainians have died. He's going to end the conflict by raising oil prices, negotiated a ceasefire all by himself, secured the Olympics and the World Cup in like 4 days, and he's done more than any other administration in 4 years. And Lautman's quote is blunt. None of these statements are true.
Whoa, okay, so we're talking about some pretty significant claims being disputed here. I mean, it's not just a difference of opinion. That's a straight up factual contradiction.
Right. And it goes on. They quote Patrick Nard, he's always good for a colorful reaction.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He talked about sensing Subric fumes coming from Davos and told listeners to close all doors and windows.
Okay, so maybe not a super nuanced policy analysis,
Yeah.
but definitely conveys a strong feeling, like something's really off here.
Right. And then there's Randy Mayhem, actually. He's a singer, but they include his reaction, too. And he focuses on this alleged misunderstanding the president has about who pays tariffs.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty important economic concept to grasp. You see, when a country imposes tariffs on goods coming in, it's not the other country that pays. It's often the businesses and consumers in the country imposing the tariffs who end up footing the bill in the form of higher prices.
So if Mayhem's right and the president really doesn't get that, well, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, that could have major implications for trade policy and how effective it is.
And then we get to Joe Girth. He's a columnist, and he brings up this whole thing about the Keystone XL pipeline. Remember how Republicans slammed the Biden administration for halting its construction?
Yeah, that was a big political battle.
Well, Girth points out that at Davos, the president said the U.S. doesn't need Canadian oil. So it seems like maybe a shift in stance, or at least the messaging around energy policy.
Huh. That is interesting.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what's driving that change? Is it a genuine evolution of policy, or is it more about tailoring the message for a specific audience at Davos?
Right. And finally, they quote a HuffPo correspondent who just lays it out there. They say, not a single assertion made by the president about the 2019 economy, how tariffs work and all that, was factually accurate. The transcript even emphasizes this with on and on and on. Like, it was just relentless.
Wow. Okay, so we've heard from experts on Russia, Ukraine, trade economics, now a general news correspondent, and they're all basically saying the president's speech was riddled with inaccuracies.
That's the picture the Ring of Fire's painting, and they
Okay.
don't stop there. They go on to say that the whole speech was delivered with this hostile tone towards the host countries, like, we're going to screw you over kind of vibe.
Oof, not exactly building bridges there.
Right, and they say it's all based on this perceived slight that doesn't actually exist. They're worried this could really damage relationships with allies and that we're in for nonstop lies this whole term.
That's a pretty bleak outlook. You know,
Uh-huh.
starting off a new term by antagonizing your allies and potentially undermining trust. In your words, that's a recipe for a rocky road ahead.
And the thing is, it wasn't just American media and commentators picking up on this. The transcript points out that international outlets in Europe even ran headlines correcting the president's statements.
Oh, wow. So this wasn't just a domestic political squabble. It was making waves internationally.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so significant. You know, when international news organizations are actively fact-checking a U.S. president at Davos, that says something.
It definitely raises questions about how this administration is going to be perceived on the world stage going forward.
So to sum it up for our listeners, the big takeaway from this Ring of Fire deep dive is that the president's first big appearance at Davos was not well received. There were widespread accusations of factual inaccuracies, a lot of concern about the tone and what it might mean for international relations.
It's definitely a lot to unpack, and it raises a lot of questions about what we can expect in this new term.
And that's really what we want you to think about. You know, how important is it to fact-check information, especially coming from powerful figures? How do we navigate this increasingly complex world where truth and fiction seem to be constantly battling it out? Something we all need to grapple with.
It's more important than ever to be critical thinkers, to question what we hear and seek out diverse perspectives to get a fuller picture.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for diving in with me today.
My pleasure. Always a good discussion.
And to our listeners, as always, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.